benchies that are weeble wobbling, prints that have way more problems than they do successes, and machines that you probably should have stopped upgrading a long time ago. All this and more, PrintFix Friday, episode 59. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here and you like this kind of thing, make sure to leave a like and get subscribed if you think we've earned it. We're going to be talking all about a bunch of fails here, and we would love to be talking about yours. Not only do you get to kind of show off your fails and then successes, because I love these ones where you have the failure and then you post the success story to a pretty big audience, but it's also a great way to help others who are new to the industry. And if you are new and are struggling with issues, you can always slide into them DMs on any of the social medias. Links will be on the screen, or tag us in your post and use the hashtag PrintFix. We'll make sure to add them to these episodes. Greatly appreciate all of your help in making these fails better. And I also appreciate your help in learning about our sponsor, 3D Musketeers. That's right, we are continuing the trend of self-sponsoring videos. We are actively looking for sponsors, so if you believe there are any companies, brands, or anything that you think would be a really great addition to our channel, let me know in those comments below. It'd be great to get a little bit of support here or there financially. And if you are the type of person that does want to kick a couple of bucks into that creator fund, we have a couple of tiers available on our Patreon and YouTube channel memberships, which of course links are in the description down below. And a couple of bucks does help go a long way to making these videos easier. That's multiple videos a week, 2 of which are professionally edited, and 1 live stream, as well as 2 time lapses. That's a lot of content when it's costing you money. But we understand that ultimately not everyone has a couple of bucks to spend. It's tough out there. I get it. Trust me. I get it. So a like and subscribe and a share if you think we've earned it absolutely helped. And if for some reason you don't think we've earned it, shoot me an email, youtube@3dmusketeers.com. I'd like to talk with you because I believe those that are critical of us would be our best people to talk to in making the channel better. But we are trying to make the content better, and that means better cameras, better photos, and just overall better content. We do appreciate any support that you guys have. Thank you for listening to this. Let's get back into fixing those fails. Slightly misaligned layers. We got ourselves a white pair of benchies here, and if you've watched the channel long enough, you know what I'm about to say. I don't like white filament because it is showing problems that don't exist. Yes, there might be a very slight line during the floor of the benchy. This is normally due to something being slightly wrong. It doesn't take much to barely over extrude the top floor of the benchy like that, as you see, and it can be just something that is slightly loose. Honestly, wouldn't even worry about it. It is a minor visual artifact that in practical use cases is not going to be a problem for what you're working on. If you are doing a project that requires the utmost precision, then you shouldn't be using FDM anyways. Yes, at some point we can sit here and try to chase zeros, but ultimately a benchy, it's got so many measurable things on it and no one actually measures anything on the benchy anymore. And I really should do a video on the benchy and why it exists, why it's called the benchy, and what on it is measurable. Let me know down in the comments if you guys would like to see something like that. I just don't know how good of a video it would actually end up being. I digress. I believe that, yeah, you might be able to dial in your flow control. I do see outside of this line, we do have some artifacting on our D retractions, it looks like, where there's a little bit of excess there, and it looks like we might have some of our infill poking through. So you might want to look at your infill overlap percentages. And I do see some drooping on the edges here. I would look at upping your cooling as well. But realistically, if it's the stock white filament that came with your printer, it's probably just bad filament. It's been sliced in both Cura and Prusa. This is good, right? You're moving toward removing the slicer as part of the problem. If you think it could be your slicer, then slice it in something different. They both have a consistent bulging layer line. It's possible because my lead screw, or could it be a filament thing? I don't believe that the issue that you're seeing is caused by your filament. I believe that this is a consistent thing. Let's zoom in a little bit here. I do see some lines right at the beginning. So at the beginning of your perimeter, although that could be the end, but it appears to be the beginning, that could be because something's a little loose. So check your V-wheels. Make sure your V-wheels are reasonably tight there, because that little bit of bulge that we see along that line that eventually goes away, it could also be due to excess back pressure that might cause that. I mean, that's a bit of a stretch, honestly. I would say minimally, let's get rid of the white filament. Let's look at this from the perspective of a gray, a blue, a red, a black. Although black filament can be a little difficult to photograph, similar issues that you would have with your white filament, where black is not going to show a lot of issues, where white is going to show too much. Can anyone tell me what these randomly missing layers are called and how to fix them? They're using Fiberology's Easy Gray PLA, nozzle temp at 200C. The printer's a FlashForge Creator Pro. They're using Cura, print speed of 60, retraction distance of 1.3, retraction speed of 30. If you need more info, let them know in the comments. This is good, moving in the right direction. It's called a partial clog that your printer end up pushing through. It might have been something related to extrusion, but because the FlashForge Creator Pro is a direct drive, and it is basically a Replicator 2X that has been rebadged FlashForge, so old school maker bots that can still hang. They're not bad printers, but they're old school. The big thing that I have an issue with on these machines, it's the issue that I've had ever since the Rep 2 came out, is the cantilever bed system. When you deal with a cantilevered bed system, you have basically one point that your bed attaches to your frame. And that means that even a slight amount of bending or a slight amount of warping at the connection point translates to quite a bit further out, because Newtonian physics, fulcrums be what they be. Remember, with a large enough lever, I too can move the world. That's what we have potentially going on here, and I think is responsible for the little bulging lines and things that you see here, the waviness. I believe that is due to the bed functionally moving around. But this, honestly, it looks like a partial clog because it pushed itself through. It could have been a bit of crap in the filament, slightly larger of a diameter, but it is Fiberology, so it is decent filament as far as I'm aware. I don't have a lot of experience with Fiberology, but I know they do make pretty decent filament. I've got a buddy who uses them pretty religiously, and he gets good prints out of them. But ultimately, I believe that could be a numerous amount of things. But the first thing I would look at is my extruders, make sure they're not getting too hot. Maybe there was a bit of heat creep that the machine was able to push through. Or more likely, it was just a bit of junk in the filament or a bit of junk that got into the nozzle, maybe some dust or whatever. The machine was eventually able to push through. Otherwise, definitely turn up your cooling. We don't have anywhere near enough cooling. These bridges kind of look like crap. We can see that they're expanding quite a bit here. And this might have been because instead of bridging completely, it ended up curling back a little bit. If that is the case, you will have to slow your bridging down or increase your fan speed, or both. If you are at 100% fan, you basically can only slow down the printer. And if you aren't at 100% fan and you are running PLA, put it at 100% fan. Other thing I noticed is we do have a bit of a Z-seam here. This does appear to be where we are doing our retractions and de-retractions. And for a direct drive system, 1.3 millimeters is a little high. Prusa's use about a 0.5 millimeter, and it works great. So I'd recommend messing around with that retraction a little bit. The speed is good for now. You can run higher if you want, because direct drives don't deal with a lot of the backlash issues and issues with ramming and pressure problems that we see out of Bowden systems. However, it is definitely something that should be taken into account when you're thinking about this in the beginning. So my thoughts here. 1, probably a partial clog. Wouldn't worry about it too much. It pushed through. We're good. 2, look at your stability of your Z-axis. It is one of the downfalls of the Replicator 2 style machines, the cantilevered Z. There's just not much you can do about it. You might want to look at moving your Z-axis slower, or potentially replacing the bushings or bearings on the Z-axis with something that's a little bit better. Even potentially some Drylin from iGoose. I would like to interview the iGoose people, so if anyone has contacts at iGoose, let me know. I'd like to interview them on a podcast. It'd be a lot of fun to talk with them about their Drylin technology comparative to ball bearings. It's a fun one that I've always wanted to talk about. But I do believe that is contributing to some of the striations and other issues that we see. In terms of the Z-banding, number 3, I am recommending that you mess around with your retraction a little bit. I do believe 1.3 millimeters is a little bit high for something like this, and you might want to look at upping your nozzle temp, but I think the cooling issue that we have here is a much more consistent problem. So slower down or more cooling, or both. There's a lot of things to do here, and I recognize that it is going to take some time to get it right. That's okay. Take your time on this one. It's all about getting it perfect, or as close to perfect as you can get. If you can't dial out the Z banding, just move on from it. It is what it is. I wouldn't worry too much about the line. It looks like it covers itself later on, so I think we're okay. Let's move on. What's this called and what might be causing it? They're printing on an Ender 3 Pro. Benchies was printed at 0.2mm layer height. We've got two different things here. This is a Z-seam, so that absolutely has to do with your retraction and de-retraction. And doing a callback to the first fail that we did in this video, you can also see a very obvious line for the Benchies. It's common. It's fine. But we absolutely have someone telling us it's a Z-seam. That's good. Ender 3 Pro, Cura, PLA 260, 50, a little fast for a Ender, but that's okay. We want retraction, that's great, but I need to know the distance. There it is, 6.5. Speed is okay. I would look at reducing my overall retraction, maybe 6, 5.5, somewhere in that range. Z-hop when retracted is good. We want that Z-hop height of 0.2. It's okay. If you're not crashing into anything, you're all right. But looking at this, we have a first layer issue. You are too close on your first layer, and that is causing some of this squishing that you see here. This is the printer basically trying to make up for the over extrusion of the first layer. Now, you might say, Grant, you said it was too close. Why are you saying over extrusion? Well, because being too close will give you the same issue as being at the right height and over extruding. It is effectively the same thing to the machine because the machine is not aware of how close it is to the build plate. Remember, Ender 3s, most of them at least, don't have auto bed leveling, so they're not aware of where their nozzle is in relation to the print bed itself. That means it's not smart, right? It relies on the user to give some feedback. This just appears to be a little bit of either perimeter or something like that that got messed up. And it looks like you're running quite a few perimeters. I don't believe more than 2 is necessary for a Benchies, but if you want to have one that's a little stronger, hey, by all means, good on you. But definitely look at dialing in that first layer. It's squished for at least the first few. All these striation lines that we see, that's generally due to a first layer being too close. I'm glad that both commenters so far have noted that the one on the side is the Z-seam, that you are able to change the placement, but you are able to avoid it completely if you really tune in your retractions and de-retractions, and this deals with coast distance, wipe distance, as well as things like retraction and de-retraction in combination with wiping and coast distance to really clean that up as good as possible. We have some Bowden-based printers that get really clean prints on because we've dialed that in. But this is a very printer-to-printer thing, and as your Bowden tube wears, that number is also going to change. It's why we recommend getting good PTFE from a company like Capricorn, a company that I did miss at the East Coast Rep Festival to interview, which I'm bummed about, but it happens. Hopefully we can get them on a podcast coming very soon. But I do believe that there are ways you can dial that out. So I disagree there. You're not technically wrong if you're not really going to take a bunch of time, but I think you're wrong. I do agree that if you're not really willing to dial it in, putting it in a corner is the best way to handle it so it is less visible. And the one on the front, they say, appears to be from an overhang. I would agree, kind of. It is an overhang caused by over extrusion of your first couple of layers. At least that's my guess here. Enders don't have the best cooling performance. This is a known thing with Ender 3 3D printers, no matter what variant they are. And it's why products like Hero Me exist. Of course, we interviewed Andy from Hero Me, or now who has taken over development of Hero Me. We'll card that episode so you guys can take a look at it in the top left. But I do agree that there's room for improvement here. The Z-seams, yeah, you can cheat, put them in a corner. That's okay. But I think it's better to actually work on getting rid of them than it is to deal with it. We do see some other little bubbles and crap in the filament. That could just be the filament being the filament. But yeah, this is an overhang. It even could be a little bit of crap that was stuck on the nozzle. Definitely take a look at your first layer. I do believe you're a little close. Been trying to fix this banding for over a month. Settings and things I've tried in the comments. Let's take a look at this. We've got a print, and the first thing that I'd like to point out is it is under extruding. We can see here in the infill that the infill is not a clean straight line. It is pretty much dots, if you will, that are barely connected to each other. So we've got that first problem. 2, nowhere near enough photos. I need a lot more photos than that, but let's see what we got in the comments. As Tyler suggested, I've been trying to fix this on my Ender 3. Well, Okay. It's heavily modded. They're running a Hero Me Gen 6 direct drive with a micro Swiss hot end and an all-metal extruder. Lots of upgrades. They're using a dual Z kit and a Big Tree Tech SKR V3 using the Clipper firmware rate. Something to note, I'm not great with Clipper. I have never used Clipper. And if you guys want to see me try Clipper for the first time, let me know. I think it might be fun, but it might also be frustrating. We'll see. I'm told Clipper is for printer firmware what Super Slicer is for slicing. It gives you a lot of options, and a lot of times those options are not really all that needed. But things like vibration control and their acceleration tuning algorithms that they use to basically deal with your resonance compensation is pretty damn cool, and it's what allows machines like the Bamboo Lab X1 Carbon to move so fast, although they claim to have a completely custom firmware, but I have a feeling it's based on Clipper. They've tried a bunch of things: calibrated E-steps, calibrated flow. You've definitely not calibrated flow. PID calibration and temp, other filaments, other slicers. My go-to is Super Slicer, but they've tried Cura and Prusa Slicer as well. Sock slicer settings, remove any Ender 3 customizations that come with the slicers, anti-backlash nuts, motor couplers that flex 20 pounds of brick. Did you smack the printer with the 20 pounds of brick? Because sometimes that can be useful. They tried printing on a concrete floor, added more walls, going slower, new e-motor cable, tore down the entire frame and rebuilt it as square as I possibly could. Eccentric nuts are all adjusted, replaced all the wheels, belts are tightened, the Z-mount is square, tried with and without the Z-motor shim fix. I would like to point out that if you've gone through all of this and you're still dealing with these problems, you have put way more time and effort into your Ender 3 than it is worth, and it is time to get a printer that actually works. And I know I come off as a bit of a Creality hater. It is because I am. I'm absolutely a hater of Creality because of their BS IP issues with Creality Cloud. We'll cart to that entire series so you guys can hear Grant rants all about that. But I recognize that at some point your time is so valuable that you've spent thousands of dollars of your own time tearing apart, modding, ripping your hair out, and all these other steps to get something that is actually worse than a bone stock Ender. And that sucks to say, but that's the way that it is sometimes. They have no Z-rod mounts at the top of the frame, so nothing hindering the Z. Changing speed and flow doesn't really seem to do anything. Lower flow hides the issues a little, but it's still there. They are so completely out of ideas and ready to throw the thing out the damn window. You know, I don't blame you. They think the only thing they haven't tried is replacing the belts themselves. It's not going to do anything. And they look fine from what they can tell. They've used Clipper for over 2 years. They could try going back to Marlin, see what it does. Any help or ideas would be appreciated at this point. I'm so fed up, I've started building a new printer at this point. It's been 1.5 months I've been working on this. If I remember anything else I've tried, I'll add it below. Nothing has been added. This is a fun one. I want you to measure 100 mil. I want you to get a gram scale. You want a scale like this. We'll link to one down in the description, commonly referred to as drug scales, but they're just high accuracy gram scales. They don't have to be expensive. This is a HobbyMate PC01, and I want you to cut 100 millimeters of filament, and I want you to put it on the scale, and I want you to measure how much 100 millimeters of filament weighs. Then I want you to reload that filament into your printer and extrude 100 millimeters of filament, and I want you then to measure how much that 100 millimeters of filament weighs. If there is any discrepancy, your steps per millimeter are not right. You are grossly under extruding from what I can tell. It is enough to still complete the lines. When we look at the infill itself, it looks like crap. I would look at also making sure that your extrusion width is correct. There are so many freaking things that could be wrong here. And because the part allows light in, we kind of can't look at this with light touching it. I need a filament that is opaque and in consistent lighting, because the shadowing that we see provides the thought that your filament might be crappy on color, but I don't think it is. I think it's just dealing with some lighting concerns that we have. This is the other thing. If you're able to print a infinity adapter, and there are tons of them online, we'll link to one that I like down in Printables, where you can just put a piece of printer paper in and take a picture of your failed part on that. So your lighting is consistent, your background is pure white, pure black, whatever color you choose. That makes my life and the life of those helping you so much easier, because we don't have to try to determine what is a light issue and what is an actual printer failure. What we do see is we've got a little bit of a line here. But this I'm looking at your infill saying that you're under extruding. These little lines here, that is commonly caused by the extruder moving a little bit. It happens on my Taz 6. Of all the printers that it happens on our Lulzbot Taz 6. And that's because the Lulzbot Taz 6 only has one mounting point. It has one screw, and then it sits kind of in a carriage. Let me get a tool head to show you. I've shown this on the channel before. This is the Morstruder. This has a 1.2 millimeter diameter nozzle. This was before Bondtech CHT and some of the other high flow nozzles were good. But the nice thing is it does tell you how many steps per millimeter you need to change everything to, so you don't hate yourself. But you see there's only one screw, and then there's this bracket down here. It is angled, so it does kind of sit in, but because it's not constant force down like that, it does have a tendency to rock ever so slightly. And while Michael Jackson might want to rock you all night, I don't want your printer to be doing that. Because if the printer is a rockin', you should probably be dealing with it because it's a problem with your motion systems. You say your eccentric nuts are tight. I don't know. This could just be basic slop inside of the Ender system. I don't know. With a printer that is modded that much, with that much weight on it, it's totally possible that it can bend the mount that it's on, or at least flex on it a little bit. I would look at potentially removing the direct drive system. You can keep the Hero Me if you really want it, but again, it's a lot of moving mass on your platform. And I know that you have the dual Z, so it's not a sagging issue in your Z axis, but I still do believe we're dealing with a wiggling problem. Your machine is wiggling. And I don't know which orientation this was printed in, so I don't know if it's wiggling in the X-axis or the Y-axis, but if you would print this the way that I would print this, which would be directly across the X-axis, your printer is shifting in the Y-axis. Check to make sure you don't have any spring tensioners on your belts. Your belt should be tight. There should not be a spring tensioner on it. It should be manually tightened, and they should twang a little bit. You don't want them too tight, obviously, but they don't want to be sagging and loose. I don't really believe it's going to be your bed, but if your screws for your bed springs are at the edge of their height, or maybe they're not as tight as one would like, they might have a tendency to move a little bit as well. This is a movement thing, but I do think before you deal with the movement concerns here, we need to deal with the fact that your infill is pretty much useless. I believe this is a flow issue. If you do get close enough, like within 2 decimal places or so, and that's on the right side, not the left side, then you're good enough as far as I'm concerned. And then you'll want to look at your line width. For a 0.4 nozzle, you want to be a minimum of 0.45 millimeter. And for infill, I normally go 0.5 or above to really make sure that infill is strong. Now, we know that a lot of the strength comes from perimeters, but that doesn't mean you should just outright ignore your infill. This one is a submission from one of our Patreon members, Train H13, and it's from a user on Facebook. And they're asking, why? Why? Well, you had a bit of an extrusion issue. To me, this looks like a clog, and the reason I'm going after this is because it looks like it started a little bit earlier. A little bit of a clog started here, and it finally came to path right over here. And what would occur is that your printer would lose extrusion for a little bit, but eventually pick it back up if it can push itself through the clog, leaving you with a little bit of a hole. But if your next layer isn't soft enough to stick to a layer that is one or more below it, it's gonna curl up, causing this bit of a gap that you see. The rest of the print looks like it did okay, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Just click reprint and send it. But if you have a problem in that same spot again, I would check to make sure that your hot end is not warming up too much, causing a bit of heat creep, or that there's something wrong with the G-code. I do believe this is just a bit of a clog, so we should be okay. What happened to my ISO? We've got some forbidden jello. This is isopropyl alcohol after it has been left to cure with raw resin in it. It turned into sludge. It doesn't work the way that you would think. The resin doesn't just precipitate out. For some reason, and it makes sense when you think about it, the raw resin can dissolve into isopropyl alcohol in solution. And that means when you put it out in the sun, that whole solution is curing into that forbidden jello. There is no easy way to do this. Now, Hackaday did put out an article all about a guy that's using toilet paper tubes as a way to reclaim isopropyl alcohol once it's been saturated with raw resin. I would like to take a look at that. We'll link to it in the description down below. Take a look and let me know if you guys want me to do a video trying that. We don't really use isopropyl alcohol here. I've been using mean green. We do use alcohol on some of the materials that need it, like the tough resins and casting resins, but normally we're just using mean green. It works fine from my perspective, but I know isopropyl works better. Some people will go to distill it, and that does work, but let's think about all the possible concerns that you might have with very hot alcohol vapors being around something that has a built-in heater that is also connected to your electricity system. One spark, one extra bit of heat, you've got yourself a pretty spicy fire. So don't distill the alcohol, please. You know, unless you're going to add some corn into it and make some good old moonshine. But that's the southern in me talking. Now, some people say that you can use cheesecloth with a lot of layers and then just kind of force it through. I don't think that's gonna get you clean IPA. I still think that's gonna give you IPA that's saturated with raw resin or cured resin. It's just gonna take out a lot of the larger particulate. And while that might work, isopropyl alcohol is cheap. Honestly, it's like 10 to 20 bucks a gallon. And if you're going through enough of it that is starting to cost you a lot of money, then maybe you should look at charging more for the prints that you're doing, or I don't know, slow down on the resin printing. I know that's sacrilege around here. I know, but there comes a point where you kind of did that one to yourself. I agree with this individual that filtering every few washes is a good way to keep your isopropyl alcohol clean, and everyone will have their own methods for filtering, but the fine coffee filters are a great way to do it. I've also seen people use chemistry grade suction filtration systems or vacuum filtration systems. Those seem to work really good, but you want to put some cotton in there so a lot of the raw resin doesn't clog your ceramic filter media. And recommendations like this I do like, where you can let the dirty IPA sit overnight, you can decant the clean-ish top layer and cure the rest. Although they say forbidden yogurt, I say forbidden Jello. What do you think? Is this Jello or yogurt or something more not safe for work? And this is another big concern that we have because, as we know, resin is toxic. You can't just throw it away. It is crap, but this is considered chemical waste at this point and needs to be disposed of properly. If you can't do that, well, maybe you shouldn't be resin printing. Yes, you can let it evaporate in the sun, but you should make sure that you cover it with a cheesecloth or something to keep animals and wildlife and all of that from getting into it. If you do have a spare room in your house with ventilation, of course, like a spare bathroom, putting it in there to evaporate is great, but nothing will do evaporation faster than good old sunlight. Once all the alcohol is evaporated off, you should be left with a relatively dry substance that can be fully cured, and you know, if it's done in the sun, it's going to cure it at the same time, and then tossed. Once resin is fully cured, it is safe to toss, but when it's still gelatinous like that, it is not safe whatsoever to toss. Now, this person does say they wish it could be sticky for the just leave it in the sun crew, but I just don't think they left it in the sun long enough personally. To me, if you're trying to reuse it, putting it in the sun is not the way to do it. I don't think reusing it is the right move though, but that's just me. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think of these print fails. I think I want to start doing more deeper dives into these print fails, but that might mean we have to spread out the episodes instead of weekly, maybe bi-weekly. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. It would be nice to have some back and forth. This really feels more one-sided to me, and I want to have more of a conversation with you all, or be able to do test prints to show the differences in settings and that kind of thing. Let me know what you guys think down in those comments below. That's all I have for you on this one. Stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video, and a massive thank you goes out to all of our Patreon and YouTube channel member supporters whose names are listed right next to me at the $5 tier and higher. Thank you all for your support. And if you want to join the elite group of Musketeers, you can do so by clicking those links down in that description down below. Right under me will be the entire PrintFixFriday series, where you can watch YouTube's longest weekly print fail fix video series, and let me know what you think, whether I'm getting it right or getting it wrong. And right next to that will be my video all about thermal runaway, one where I did kind of get it wrong, but I'm looking to remedy that soon. Get subscribed. I'll see you guys down in those comments and in the next one. Take care.